You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today, and to learn a little bit more about life in their world. Bobby Berk originally hails from Texas, but big dreams for the big city brought him to New York in 2003. A unique millennial viewpoint and substantial experience across many facets of the trade led Bobby to a bona fide IT status in the home design world. He has appeared on HGTV, Bravo, NBC, and CBS, and his distinct approach to modern design epitomizes his hip, minimalist, urban luxury, bringing a youthful spirit to any cool, relaxed lifestyle. Bobby, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. We're both having fun with our voices today as a result of last night at the Pinnacle Awards, but thank you for being a presenter.
We're all voiceless by the end of the night.
Well, you told me earlier when we were off air that you started out in Texas, but you really lived most of your life in Missouri.
Yeah. I was born in Texas, spent a lot of my summers there because my grandparents and my aunts and uncles also lived there. But my mom and dad moved to Missouri pretty much, actually, even before I was born. I was born in Texas, but they had already been living in Missouri, and then they took me back. I was adopted, so they took me back to Missouri. Yeah,
so Joplin, I guess, was the area?
No, it's actually a little town called Mount Vernon. It's pretty much right in the middle of Springfield and Joplin, which people don't know where either of those are. But to me, they were the big city.
So a lot of folks live there, or was it a small?
The little town I lived in, we lived way out in the middle of nowhere in the country, so we didn't even live in town. Most of our neighbors were Amish. But the town itself only had about 3,000 people in it, which was the big town. When I was little, we actually lived in Missouri, which had about 600 people in it. We lived on old historic Route 66, way out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
We even had a party line that we shared phones. Most millennials do not know what a party line is.
Yes. Well, okay.
Yeah, we went from a party line to then our own line where you only had to dial 4 numbers.
Okay.
Then it was a big deal when we had to start dialing 7 numbers.
But no crank. No. Okay, good.
It was rotary, but no crank.
Okay. Well, your early career, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, what kind of got you moving in the direction you began in back then?
I got interested in design when I was little, still living in Missouri. Mm-hmm. There was a collaboration between Michael Graves and Target. I don't know if you remember that. It was actually the very first designer collaboration Target ever did. And I was sitting next to the head of home for Li and Feng, who manufactures everything for Target. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me that it was actually one of the most successful to date after all these years.
Wow.
So when I first saw that as a little kid and saw that tea kettle and those spatulas and the salt and pepper shakers and the clocks, and just thinking to myself, I didn't realize that those type of things were designed, because
they were just appeared.
Well, no, they were just spoons before,
Yeah.
it was a functional piece.
Right.
So for me to see something that was just a day-to-day functional piece actually look cool and not like everything else, it made a really big impact on me. And I still remember standing in that aisle as a little kid right now.
Wow.
So that kind of got me thinking about design. Still back then I didn't really think of doing it because it's just not what you did. We were ranchers, we were farmers. You didn't think of, even though when I was little, all the old farmers would look at me, they'd be like, boy, you don't belong here, do you? You belong in New York City or something. And finally, as I got older, I was like, you're right. I do.
So you headed there, I guess that was it 2003 or?
That's when I headed to New York. I left home at 15.
Okay.
And I moved to the big city of Springfield, Missouri. And I sold long distance on the telephone for MCI, and I worked for Applebee's and lived in my car, and a lot of odds and end jobs, graveyard shifts at gas stations. And then eventually in 99, I moved to Denver.
Okay. Now that's okay. I was thinking east and then, okay, now we're in Denver.
Yeah, no, Denver was a nice little stepping stone. I still remember, though, I rented a U-Haul. decided to leave Missouri and move to Denver within 24 hours. I kind of had a nervous breakdown one day going, nothing's happening with my life here. I've got to get out of Missouri. The only person in the world I knew outside of Missouri was somebody in Denver. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to Denver. All right. Had no job, had no money, had nowhere to live. Called my friend and he's like, I'll find you a place to live. He called me back in 2 hours. His old college roommate would let me live there until I found a place. At the time, one of my 3 jobs was the stock guy at the body shop. So I went in there and I told my manager, I'm like, I really want to go to Denver. I don't know what I'm going to do. She came out an hour later and said, you're now the new assistant manager of the body shop at the DIA airport. So I'm like, all right, well, I got an apartment. I've got a job, but I still have no money. So I went home and I realized I had a huge DVD collection. And back then, you could still sell them and get money. So I went to Hastings Music and I sold all of my DVDs, made about $500. Used
That's
that
big money.
It was to me.
Yeah.
I still remember, I was telling my assistant the other day, it was like my salary at the body shop was $24,500 a year. And I was like, oh my God, I am rich.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to Denver and I soon realized I was not. 24,000 in Missouri was a lot, but not in Denver.
Not in Denver.
So I loaded up the truck and I moved to Beverly and I ended up in Denver and then was in Denver for about 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I went to visit a friend in New York and I fell in love with New York City and I made it a goal to get there.
Now, your education, were you looking and dealing with design in education at that point? Was that...
You know what? I left home at 15, and I unfortunately had to quit school. Right. So it was either eat and have a roof over my head or not.
Right. Understood.
So I told myself, I'm going to take a semester off, and then I'll go back. And I never did. Yeah. And at a certain point, I was just like, well, it's a little too late now.
Yeah.
So once I got to New York, my first job was restoration hardware. And I had been in retail before that. I was a human resource manager for Gap and a visual merchandising manager for the Limited Inc. with Bath and Body Works and Express. So I had always been in retail, kind of the design area of it, but not really getting into home yet, even though that was still kind of my passion. Okay. I'd always remodel all the apartments I lived in and remodel friends' apartments. And the owner of one of the buildings I lived in Denver, in this old ghetto building, I redid mine so well that he hired me to redo all the apartments in the building. So again, it was always my passion, but I had no education in it. I had no way to get into it. So got a job at Restoration Hardware managing that store in Manhattan. And
that's a good look. That's a great location.
It was a great location. Yeah, that's actually where I first met Tom Felicia, filming for Cry for the Stray Guy.
Very good. Very good.
Which, funny enough, was the reason I got fired.
You're kidding. Oh, my goodness.
Was there late that evening getting ready for filming for them the next day. Ended up being there 4 hours later than we were supposed to. We all forgot to clock out. But the next day, I went in and noticed that the district manager had clocked us out when we were technically supposed to leave. I looked at the other manager I was with. I was like, we were both here till 1, right? I'm going to change our times. Well, somebody had it out for me, and I changed my own time. So that day, I got fired. Funny enough, the person who fired me recently commented on my Facebook when she saw a show I was on. She's like, see, I did you a favor.
Okay. So things come back.
It does. And I was like, you know what? For a few years after that, I wouldn't have agreed with you. But I go, now, thank you.
Well, what an experience with Tom and all of that, and you seeing what's going on there, realizing what you've done later in life. It's amazing. So I see there's something else. Portico Home and Spa? What can you tell me about that?
When I got fired from Restoration Hardware, I actually went to work for Bed Bath & Beyond. Very interesting job. I ran the whole front end of their busiest store in the world in Chelsea in New York City. That store did more business in a week than most districts do in a month. Wow. We had a little room up on the second floor where 4 people sat there all day long and did nothing but count cash. It was like
That's a lot
casino.
Of business.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
At the time, it was the only Bed Bath & Beyond in Manhattan. It was the only store of any name to get stuff in Manhattan. There were no Walmarts or Kmarts or Targets. It was Bed Bath & Beyond. So if you needed something for your house, you went to Bed Bath & Beyond. So It was a crazy busy store.
Now, how did that feel versus where you were at Resto? You go from Restoration Hardware into this. How different was that? Or was it just another step along the pathway?
It was just another. I mean, at that point, it was retail management.
Gotcha.
It was just another step. I then ended up getting recruited by a little Italian bedding company who wanted me to help them expand their brand in the U.S. And everything I told them they needed to do, no, that's not right. That's not right. I mean, down to the fact that I told them, I'm like, Americans want flat sheets. No, just fitted sheets and duvet covers. I'm like, no, that Americans want flat sheets. Like even the basics of bedding in the States, they just refuse to listen to me. You know, typical Italian. No, this is right. I'm like, you have beautiful product, but you don't know the American consumer. Eventually, the owner fired me, telling me I'd amount to nothing and that I was worthless. And how I got involved with Portico is the linen company actually supplied linens to Portico.
Okay.
And so I had become friendly with the owner of Portico, and he's like, dude, come work for me.
Yeah. Don't continue that because your argument will never win.
So I started working at the Soho store, managing that store for them, and I ended working my way up through buyer and then eventually creative director of the company.
Wow.
And unfortunately, the company was always going through some problems, and in end of 2005, they finally filed for bankruptcy. And I was literally the last man standing at Portico. The owner told me, when it comes out of bankruptcy, you know, make you a partner. I was running PorticoHome.com from my bedroom on the Upper East Side, still making it look like it was a big company.
Oh, yeah.
So when we got it out of bankruptcy, we could keep going. I get a letter from the court one day that the intellectual property had been sold and cease and desist, shut the website down. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? You know, I have no job now. So I had built the e-commerce division for Portico. So I cloned that site and I popped Bobby Berk Home on it and said I'd do that for a couple of weeks while I looked for a job. And fast forward 10 years later.
Wow. In 2007, Bobby took a leap and opened his own store, Bobby Berk Home. Bobby, I was thinking about when you made that transition to Bobby Berk Home, and looking at the process, the experiential learning process and creative, the change in your creative process from retail management and retail display, et cetera, into this Bobby Berk Home. How do you see that move in the creative process, the change occurring? What changed for you as you grew into Bobby Berk Home?
Well, for me, you know, I think my retail background actually was a huge benefit for me. Not only did it help me know how to run a store, but it also had taught me how consumers buy, especially working for Bed Bath & Beyond. You know, honestly, it was one of the most miserable jobs I'd ever had in my life, but it definitely taught me. I mean, they're a well-oiled machine, you know. Every square inch of their stores, they know exactly how much per square foot it's producing.
So you got a feeling for what runs,
you know,
hums.
If there's an end cap that doesn't sell the amount of units it's supposed to sell in a few hours, they've moved it.
Wow.
You know, so it's a brilliant company, which is why they've been so successful. They just work you to death.
Well, I hear you. Yeah.
So the creative process for me was always that of a retailer, you know, where I was lucky enough that I at least, you know, for the most part, pretty much had good taste as well. So we were able to curate good product. But the creative process for me was always, how is this going to sell? How is the consumer going to react to it?
So you had a future thought. You were bringing that up. You always knew at the moment or in the ideation phase,
right,
kind of, listen, I got to market this. It's got to sell.
Yeah, and I was, you know, again, I started out just online. You know, we were online for, I would say, at least a year and a half before I opened up a store. And, you know, that was before the Wayfarers and the Yellow Moderns. And it was, I don't know if you remember Velocity Art and Design.
I do.
John out of Seattle.
Yeah.
It was me. It was him and Design Public. That was it.
Wow.
We were, if you wanted modern stuff, that was it. So I launched at a really lucky time because I was able to learn how to manipulate the internet and SEO to really build a business quickly. Before, there were thousands of home websites out there. You know, back then you had to really know how to build a website to launch one. You couldn't just go on and build a website in 5 minutes like you can now. You needed to know coding. You needed to know search engine optimization. And I was lucky enough that I had plenty of time sitting at home to teach myself that kind of thing.
I'm thinking back to the time when you were operating that website before they said, "Hey, by the way,
Exactly.
we sold the intellectual property. You're done."
Yep.
But you learned through doing.
Right.
I mean, and that's
Yeah.
I don't know. Then it became, I guess, ingrained in you. You knew it as you breathed it. It was okay.
You know, Kelly Ellis and I were doing a panel the other day, and somebody asked a question about, what if you're asked to do something that, you don't know how to do? And she's like, always say you do. And then frantically teach yourself how to do it. And that's kind of always a philosophy I'd had as well, which is why I think her and I get along so well, is no is not an answer. Not I don't accept it as an answer, and I don't give it as an answer on when it comes to getting things done like that. Yep, absolutely, we can do that. And then I will teach myself how to get it done,
That gives you a kind of an internal clock and an engine and a drive.
Right.
Which I see that in you all the time. But I think the other day, you were standing on an ottoman or a bench or something, I saw it in the paper. You were talking to a group.
That was in the paper?
Yeah, you were needing to get their attention. And by golly, you got their attention. It was pretty easy. So good for you.
What paper did that end up in?
Furniture Today, back page electronically.
How funny.
I'll forward that to you. So in this process, there was you, there was Bobby Berk Home, there was the experiential learning up to that point, and your internal drive. So did you have any either role models? You mentioned one earlier, but or mentors along the way, that someone who gave you a couple of ideas or a little support along the way that you feel?
I mean, I definitely, some of my role models were Michael Graves, just
going back to your first experience looking in
exposing a new generation to iconic design, taking that iconic type of design that was normally only accessible to, a select few, the people who knew art, the educated ones, the masses, especially in Middle America, they never saw stuff like that, so definitely he was a big role model. In retail, Mickey Drexler was a huge role model. I worked for Gap before. Yeah. Just very impressive. So I would say those two are good ones to go with.
Well, we kind of discussed as you were in your younger years, there were successes, there were failures. And so what can you say as you developed Bobby Berk Home? Let's say, give me an example of a failure maybe that
well, I always say there are no failures or successes in life. They're just experiences. So
I'll change my question. Tell me a few experiences.
There's definitely been a lot of crazy up and downs. As at the awards last night when Bob was talking about, he's like, when did you open up your business? I was like, well, I launched in November of 2007. He's like, oh, great.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, that's exactly the sound I made when January 2008 rolled around.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
Everything went to crap. And I was like, what did I say? I had just opened my Soho store. And the funny thing about how I got my Soho store was, remember that Italian guy I worked for?
Yep.
I get a call one day after my online business had been going and successful for about a year and a half. And he's like, hey, this is David. I have a store in Soho and it's not doing so well. I see that yours is. Would you want to buy me out? So I was like, wait, I thought I was an idiot. What? I thought you knew everything. So I, let him sweat it for a few minutes. And then, his company had massive amount of debt, which I had to take on, but I looked at it as an opportunity to have a store in Soho, New York.
Yeah.
That usually takes brands decades to accomplish. And I looked at that, and all of my friends in finance were like, you are crazy to take on this guy's debt. But I'm like, no, it's an opportunity to elevate the brand light years ahead of how long it would normally take me. So I made the decision to do the opposite of what everyone else was telling me to do. And I took a chance and it paid off, So that was one of the successes. I wouldn't say one of the failures, but one of the learning experiences was expanding too quickly. Was entrusting the wrong people too. I did New York and Miami on my own. They both did really well. I unfortunately realized I then needed somebody to kind of take the operations off.
You're being stretched a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to design anymore. I was just dealing with operations and, human resource issues.
So suddenly you were away from what you really love to do.
So we brought in a new CFO, ended up embezzling and taking advantage of the company. I ended up with 2 stores that I should have never opened. So that was, I guess one could say a failure, but again, to me, it was a learning experience.
Exactly. You're not going to ever repeat that.
Exactly.
And you'll know better. And I think everyone learns that way.
Yeah.
Well,
and again, it continued to expand the brand.
Yeah.
On the inside, it may have been in turmoil, but it continued to expand the brand. And everything that's happened, good or bad, has been stepping stones that led to where I am today.
I wanted to hear more about Bobby's perspective on the pathway to success. I'm looking at everything we've talked about so far, and one of the things my gut's telling me is that, really, you've discovered there's really no one strict pathway. There's no, graduate school of business, one way to look at anything. I'm sure, as you told me earlier, there are people that were really strong business folks who kept telling you, no, you can't. Oh my gosh, no, you can't do it this way. We don't do it, things like that. The business school didn't teach us how to do that. And yet you've trusted your vision, and your vision has told you, no, everybody's telling me this, but I want to go that way. Well, tell me a little more about.
Yeah, I used to have a store manager in my New York store who had also been a good friend of mine for a long time. So he was always pretty straight up with me, which is the reason why I had him around. I appreciated that. And he said to me once, he's like, you know what? Every time you go to do something big with business, I'm like, no, what is he doing? This is not the right answer. And he's like, I've learned to just keep my mouth shut, because even though what you're doing is against everything I learned in business school, it always seems to work. And he's like, and I think the reason why is because you don't have that education in your back of your mind telling you that I have to do it a specific way. So you don't have fear of doing it any way that you think works, because you don't know if it's the right way or the wrong way. It's just, this is where your gut's telling you to go. He's like, where I have that, this is the way you do it. This is the way business is structured in the back of my mind. And it keeps me from doing things that are kind of out of the box. Not that a business education is bad. There are many days where I wish I had one, believe me.
Oh, yeah.
But I definitely think that you have to trust your gut to a certain extent and realize that the most successful businesses out there are the ones that took their own path.
So a message for our listeners, especially the young ones who are just in school, finishing school and design school, or about to hang their shingle, or just did hang their shingle, is to trust your gut, I guess.
I started my company literally with no money. I registered my website for $20. That's the investment I put in Bobby Berk Home, was $20.
Wow.
And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh, yeah.
And, I've never had an investor. I've never gotten a loan. It's always been organic growth. So and most people would say, oh, no, you don't do that, but it worked.
I'm thinking, and I'm just sewing a thread that goes all the way back to Missouri, in a small town, and living in your car for a little while and so forth. That drove you to say, when I make my decisions and make my moves, I'm 110% in.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want it to run and be successful. And I don't want to be, that's the drive in your gut is maybe attached to that you want to not be that.
The drive in my gut was there was no room to fail. There was no running back to mommy and daddy.
Right.
There was no running back to anybody. Mm-hmm. If I failed, I was on the street. So I think that's always some pretty good motivation.
Very much so. Very much so.
Again, there was no fallback. There was no backup plan. It was, this will work.
Well said. Well said. And I commend you for that, because the spirit shows in everything you do. Speaking of everything you do, what a segue! My goodness. You're branding your products. You're spreading out into other categories of merchandise and so forth. How's that going for you? What's the latest in that? How many products are you into?
It's going really well. Back in the stores, I realized there was a market for, not just cool product, but cool product with a story. As Bob was saying last night, I don't know if you saw me shaking my head in agreement, millennials love a story. And it's so true. I've said that time and time again, that if you can put a good story behind your product, if you can train your salespeople, if you can train those retailers that story, millennials love it. They love, a story to tell about their sofa while they're sitting there drinking their artisanal beer. So it's you've got to have more than just a cool product. So the opportunity came along to start licensing my name and my brand through one of the manufacturers we were carrying in my stores, which was Surya. It was our first deal. So we did rugs and pillows with them. And then we started doing wallpaper with tint paper, which that wallpaper is now on Target.com, HSN. A Japanese department store just picked it up, so it's now all over Japan.
Wow.
We have new lines that we're launching at the Atlanta market in January. We're in negotiations on signing a new licensing deal for lighting, which will be in some major retailers.
Fabulous. How are you finding working in lighting and design?
Well, we're still in the contract stages.
Oh, okay.
So
I'll bet you're excited about getting
I
into
actually am.
Yeah.
Lighting was always such a hard category for us to find for my stores. Because with lighting, if it was really great, cool design, it's usually pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And opening up the month I did, I had to quickly make the decision that we were not going to be an accessible store. Okay. I was always going to keep our price points pretty accessible. So with lighting, if it looked cool and it was great, it was too expensive. Or if it looked cool and it was accessible, it was usually crap. So I'm actually really excited to do lighting because I feel there's a hole in the market for accessible modern lighting that isn't going to fall apart on you.
Thank you very much for that, because I've had a few fall apart on us.
To me, one of our mission statements is make furniture your kids or your grandkids will fight over. I can't stand the disposable generation.
What a great
I think
phrase.
Things should last, whether you keep them forever or you pass them on to somebody else. I don't think they should be something that ends up in a landfill. So I try to always think about that when we're designing.
Well, I certainly agree with that. That's a really good philosophy to live by. Latest projects. What's going on now?
On design? Well, I was lucky enough to be asked to design the show homes for the International Builder Show last year.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you. They hired Ketchum PR, and they were tasked with finding a designer because these homes were specific to millennials.
Okay.
So these were the show homes of the future of teaching home builders what millennials are looking for in homes. So Ketchum PR was supposed to find an interior designer that spoke most to millennials and that millennials would know. And they found me. And I owe that all to Cindy at Furniture Today and Designer Today. Great. Because she was one of the first people that had me start writing about my point of view on millennials and speaking about millennials. So when Ketchum was doing their research about designers and millennials, I was one of the main ones that came up. Wonderful. So those houses actually were quite successful. One of them won a Gold Nugget Award for the best custom home under 3,000 square feet in the world.
Congratulations on that. That's wonderful.
So within a year, I went from being a retailer and product designer to now an interior design business that we can barely keep up with. We're working on 7 homes right now. I've dropped more money at this market than I actually ever have. Just furnishing homes.
I'm thinking you're thinking in your head going, whoa, that's a lot of money. And would I have ever thought I would be doing that?
Yeah, because back when I had stores, I dropped money, but never at market. I came to market. Right. I saw my suppliers. I saw what was new. We went back to the store. We made plans for seasons. Things would come in, we've got to get rid of this stuff before we bring in a new floor move. So I never really placed orders at the store or at the shows. But at this show, we dropped over 6 figures just on interior design projects.
Well, you got enough going on. Huh?
Yeah, and we've been really lucky that because of doing those 2 show homes, we're working with a lot of home builders. And we're working with builders who, before we came along, we call them builders of the land of the Tuscan foe. Because all they built were those awful Tuscan faux houses that just one same after another, one just slightly different shade of taupe and brown. So we're now building mid-century modern homes and farm homes and super contemporary homes and party homes that we're working with. They've always been one of the top builders in their industry, but now they're one of the top and most unique, to where people are really seeking and coming after them because they know that their house isn't going to look like every house on the block. You know, they're building neighborhoods that like we grew up in where every house is different.
Yeah.
You know, of course, there's still production homes, so not every house is different, but they're not all Tuscan faux. You'll have a mid-century frame, you'll have a farmhouse frame, you'll have a contemporary frame, all in the same block, to where the neighborhoods are starting to look unique again. And we're really working with them, not just on the homes, but on the neighborhoods, teaching them that, you know what, if you're going to get millennials to leave the urban areas, you need to give them something. You need to make them not feel like they're being cut off from the world. And, you know, millennials, we don't want cars. We might have to have one, but we definitely don't want multiple ones. So you need to make sure you're integrating Zipcar stops in those, you know, neighborhoods to where they're a family, they kind of only need one car, and then they can use social sharing. So there's a lot of fun ways that we're helping these builders and developers make their new developments more millennial friendly. And the funny thing is, people always ask me, like, you know, what do millennials want? I was like, you know what, honestly, the same things everyone wants. It's just we are so connected more than any other generation ever has. We're exposed to good design all day long on Pinterest and Houzz, and we know what's out there. Where generations before us just kind of accepted the status quo. They accepted what home builders were giving them because, oh, well, I guess this is great. But we don't accept that. You know, we demand more. And I think it's really great that it's kind of forcing companies and builders and designers to demand more of themselves and do more for not just to make sales, but do more for the environment, the planet, and for, you know, social things. So.
Wow. Well, then I think you've Bobby Berked them. I've got a new phrase there. You've actually said you need to think my way. Look, it's working, and believe in yourself. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm coming back full circle to maybe a little advice you might want to give young people out there who are thinking about, well, they're about to graduate or they're just hanging their shingle on. We just said some things right there. Think outside the box, believe in yourself. You know, don't let everybody about you direct where you're going to go with your life. Anything else you might want to impart?
Don't take no for an answer.
Well put.
Yeah.
Well put. That's excellent. What's the future hold for Bobby Berk? I can see endless possibilities. How are you viewing it?
My ideal situation is, you know, hopefully soon, as we fully round out our offerings of product through licensed partners, is to start doing, you know, shop and shops and maybe a Bloomingdale's, hint, hint, Bloomingdale's.
Hint, hint. Yes.
You know, things like that. I'd love to do a lifestyle look, because that's what my stores were about.
Oh, great.
You know, my whole vision for my stores were eventually for it to all be Bobby Berk Home product. You know, but as we started licensing and as other retailers started picking up my product, I realized, I'm like, I don't need to inundate my life with nothing but operations and human resource issues and not have any time to design.
For sure.
I can have a much happier life and a more fulfilling life because I'm designing, which is what I love, by just designing more product for more retailers and not having to retail myself. So that's why we ended up moving from the retail direction to the design direction, because I'm accomplishing the same thing at the end of the day, but I'm getting to do a lot more of what I love.
Well,
yeah. And that's some advice. Said. Make sure you do what you love.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. I want to say it's been a pleasure talking with you today.
You too.
Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for imparting your knowledge. I'm ready to go out and beat the world myself right now. You've imbued me with your energy, and I thank you for that, Bobby.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Bobby Berk for being on the show today and sharing his unique perspective on design for the millennial generation. This episode of Design Between the Lines is sponsored by Furniture Today, the weekly business newspaper for the U.S. furniture industry. Furniture Today is the complete information source for the furniture industry, providing retailer and manufacturing news and research, plus product trends and market analysis. Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the American Society of Furniture Designers. We're recorded in High Point, North Carolina. To learn more about ASFD, visit asfd.com, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of Design Between the Lines.